Hello everyone, I wanted to make this brief video for you on this topic that has come up over the last few weeks. It's this idea of doom scrolling. I've shared, there's an article out there. The idea is that we can get caught in this habit of just perpetually looking at our smartphones and scrolling through news and information, primarily about this pandemic we're dealing with the COVID-19. But also any negative news that we might be looking at. And so I thought I would talk a little bit about that and give some advice just based on some things that I've seen that might help dealing with this particular phenomena. So to start, I wanted to read a little bit from the Gospel of Matthew. This is Matthew 6:22 and 23. The lamp of the body is the eye. If therefore your eye is good, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eye is bad, your whole body will be full of darkness. If therefore the light that is in you is darkness, how great is that darkness? So it's this admonition from Christ himself saying that our spiritual lives really are determined to a great extent by what we look at and what we focus on. Now, I know that part of our concern dealing with a global pandemic is keeping informed. And clearly there's nothing wrong with keeping informed. And actually, I would advise you probably should have regular information about what's going on about the world around us and specifically what's happening with this particular virus. It's a public health issue. And so we need to know what's happening out there. Now, what I want to address with this idea is, do we focus on constantly looking at that information and constantly thinking about what's happening in the world in some effort to try and control it? And some studies have shown that this phenomena has developed over the past few months, and there are higher incidences of depression and things like that because it's just this constant input of negative information. So how might we deal with this? Well, the idea for the most part is that we want to limit and curate the sort of information that we look at. Let me talk about the limiting piece first of all. Of course, it's this great convenience that we have a phone that can provide any information that we want at any time, 24/7. And of course, there are all sorts of things that have developed to cater to that, including news apps, social media apps, and just the ability to look at things on an ongoing basis. Well, to work on this doom scrolling idea, because, it's this habit that we can get into of looking at things on our phone, we really need to look at the information elsewhere. And so a first step would be to delete all of those apps from your phone. You don't have to have a Facebook app on your phone. You don't have to have a Twitter app on your phone. You don't have to have YouTube on your phone. You can look at all of those things on a computer. And the idea is that a computer is located in one location, and you actually have to go there and sit down and be intentional about what you do on a computer. I know there's still the tendency to go and stray and do different things here and there, but it's a very different sort of experience than just pulling your phone out of your pocket and saying, well, I'm just gonna. And of course, I'm just gonna, turns into a half hour later. Well, I'm just gonna look at this one thing. So the first step, limit by limiting the apps. The next thing would be to limit your interaction with social media and news. I guess a prior thing that I would put here is also, in terms of news, I would not watch television news. There's been a long-standing thing with television news. I myself have not watched television news for years. There are certain times, like if there's a weather alert and there's, like a possible tornado or something like that, I will go look at local news because they have the local weather and they tell you at the moment what's happening. That's really the only instance that I look at that. And that is available online. You don't have to look at something on a television show. The problem with television news is we got out of this phenomena about 30 years ago. I'm an old guy. I remember there was the evening news. You'd turn on the TV, you'd have a half-hour program that would tell you everything that was happening in the world, and then it was followed by a half hour of local news that would tell you everything that's happening in your local area. But now we have this 24/7 news cycle that goes on. And the problem is there's repetition, and there is this motivation to get audience to watch it. So it tends to be more about how can we draw a person in as a viewer, and far less about presenting news. And part of that is getting into this area of opinion or analysis. It's not so much about presenting, this is what happened in the world today. It's more about, we're going to break this down, we're going to explain it to you, we're going to kind of put our own piece in on that. There's a place for that, but that is the primary thing that we see on television. And we talk about the phenomena of talking heads, people that just are talking their way through what's happening and offering what tends to be more opinion than presenting of information. So that's the other thing. So no apps on your phone, get off the television. Well, where should we go to be informed then? Well, as I said earlier, the whole process of getting information from social media is to limit your contact with social media as well, and limit your contact with news. So I'd say whatever you participate in terms of social media, be it Twitter or Facebook, or maybe even YouTube, you put a limitation on yourself. You will only do those activities twice a day. And a pattern that works for people, depending upon their work schedule, is they'll get up and get ready. They might have 15 minutes before they get to go to work, and that will be their morning window to look at things. And they will strictly adhere to that. I have 15 minutes to look at all of these sites. And by the same token, at the end of the workday, they can come home and they'll have 15 minutes of looking on those sites at the end of the workday. And so that puts a limitation on that, and it makes it more of a qualitative experience. Instead of this endless, I have to look at things, I have to go over things here. Now, in terms of news information, I've said a lot about not watching television news. Well, where should we get our information? Well, it's tricky because everyone has their favorite places to look. And part of that tends to have to do with an editorial policy and even the opinions offered by those news sources. If the intention is to be informed, we should look to those places that give primarily information and not the opinion and not the analysis. So what I would recommend, and this is specific to us, living here in Ohio, and of course dealing with a global pandemic within the context of how that is playing out in Ohio. I have 3 recommendations. One, for your overall news, I would look at the AP website, Associated Press. It's a wire service. They present articles about what's happening in the world, and there's not a lot of opinion in there. It's just information. Then I would look at a local news source. We have cleveland.com, or some of the local television stations do a good job of presenting information online. And if I was looking at one of those news stations, it would not be to watch their videos of the news. It's to read the articles they've written. It's a very different experience to actually read news as opposed to just watch it being presented through a video. And then the last piece is specifically dealing with this global pandemic and the coronavirus, is that we have in Ohio coronavirus.ohio.gov, which is run by the state government, and it has input from the governor and the state health authorities. It's updated daily, and we get information on what's actually happening with COVID-19 as it happens within our state. So we know how many cases there are, kind of what the status is in each county of the state, and we get an accurate picture of how that pandemic is affecting people in our local context. So as I said, opening up, the idea is that we want to limit what we do and we want to curate what we look at so that we can be informed and we can look more towards that idea of the eye of the body. The eye is the lamp of the body, as we hear in Matthew, and that the idea is that we want light in our lives. So how can we have more light? This is something that I could probably speak about at further length. Well, going back to your smartphone, probably the easiest thing to do is put a Kindle app on there. And all major Orthodox publishers publish their most popular books in Kindle format. Have some book you can pull up. So in those I just wanna moments, when you can't go and look at Facebook or Twitter or YouTube or a news site, you can read something edifying. It's not denying what's happening in the world, but it's making sure that you're still focusing on the light that Christ gives us, even in these times of difficulty, suffering, and sacrifice. So that's what I'd like to share with you today. It's this idea of how to deal with doom scrolling in our lives. And I wish you all the best as we continue on. God bless you all. Hello, everyone. I wanted to make this